They used to meet when I was doing the nesting bird surveys for Ross Valley Fire District. I would go out there and we would run into each other and then end up chatting for like 30 minutes. Like, I don't even know where I was. The birds are all sleeping now.
Welcome, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. First, I'd like to ask Management Analyst Martina Wilson to begin recording the meeting.
And meeting is being recorded, Director.
Okay, thank you. And if we could do a call to order, please.
Absolutely. Good afternoon and welcome to the Thursday, February 20th meeting of the Marin Wildfire Board of Directors agenda. Starting with roll call, do we have Fairfax?
Here.
Novato? Apologies, Director Goings will not be with us this afternoon. Do we have Larkspur?
Yes, here.
Muir Beach? Sleepy Hollow?
Here.
Kentfield? Southern Marin? Stinson Beach?
Here.
Marin Wood? Bolinas?
Here.
Ross?
Here.
Mill Valley?
Here.
Corte Madera? County of Marin?
Here.
Inverness?
Here.
San Anselmo? And the city of San Rafael.
Here. Thank you. Do we have any adjustments to the agenda? No? Okay, we'll move to open time for public expression. If there's anyone who'd like to address the Board of Directors at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the board, please be advised that pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2, the board is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 2 minutes and should be respectful to the community. Bettina, do we have any comment?
There are currently no hands for comment in the room, and there are no hands for comment in the virtual audience.
And Mark, we'll move on to our Executive Officer's report.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Marin Wildfire on an absolutely beautiful day. I hope you had an opportunity at least to get outside other than driving here to the prior to our meeting. And then thank you, Dennis, for the reminder to mute our mobile devices. And I'll check mine right now. All right. I think we all are aware that February is Black History Month, and I want to thank Martina for her research of what she found. And I think it's so apropos to what's going on today in the fire service. There is a saying in the fire service that the fire service is 150 years of tradition unimpeded by progress. And I think these next couple of slides are going to show that. So we did have our, we think the first black fire chief in the United States was January 4th of 1871. And it's disappointing that we have not continued to be able to have a large black representation within the fire service. And we definitely need to work towards that. I think the Fire Foundry is an excellent example of how we are creating solutions towards that. But a couple of things I want to notice about Chief Raymond. Look for stronger fire prevention codes. How appropriate is that for today's what we're talking about? Increased fire companies with increased staffing. Wow. Nothing's changed in 150 years. And then we also had Thomas J. Martin fire extinguisher design actually create the first internal fire sprinkler, which is still an important tool. And it was in the 90s that Marin passed a residential fire sprinkler code. So from way back then to now, we're still not having all municipalities having internal fire sprinkler. I do want to differentiate between internal fire sprinkler and external fire sprinkler, big differences. And then another thing that we are continuing to do in the fire service is what's called a standards of cover. And that is how fast do we get how many bodies to a fire? And so response time is very important, but we never want to tell our firefighters to drive faster. We want to shave off time on how fast they get to the fire engine and out of the station. So when we look at fire station design, We try to make the distance short as possible from wherever they are to the fire engine. So it was a black firefighter that created the first fire pole, which was designed to get firefighters to their fire engines faster. Quick piece of trivia about two-story stations. Why did old fire stations have spiral staircases? Horses can't go up a spiral staircase. Our police officer answered that question for us. And then we have 1910, the smoke helmet, which is essentially our modern day self-contained breathing apparatus that our firefighters would be crippled without having that device going into the smoke field. So some tremendous accomplishments from black firefighters throughout the history. We obviously need to discuss what's been going on with SoCal and the fires that have occurred in Southern California. I think I won't rehash everything that we've been doing. I think you've heard it over and over and over, but we do have our one-page list of statements. And so we can have consistent messaging. We've been working very hard with Fire Safe Marin to create sound bites, video bites, social media snippets, all going towards that consistent messaging. And that is, we're in this together. The strength of our community is the sum of its parts. And we've already learned these lessons. We need to apply the solutions to the lessons that we've already learned. And that requires government entities working together with private entities, and it requires our residents stepping up and taking action. We've had a lot of media attention in the Marin IJ. The Stanford Forum went really well. MCCMC, lively conversation there, I thought very productive. We've had a couple different Facebook and YouTube live sessions. Really appreciated the opportunity to participate in the Wildfire Watch. Chief Weber here with me, Stephen Torrance, Rick Navarro bringing the law enforcement and evacuation aspect to it. And again, beautifully facilitated by Rich Shortall. And then how many of, raise a hand, how many of the local jurisdictions been having meetings at their council or boards? And so, and I know that your local member agency has been in contact with us to make sure that that messaging is consistent. So I really appreciate that. A lot of concern about the federal budget and actions that are being taken at the federal level. One thing I wanted to let everyone know, currently, no Marin Wildfire funding is based on federal funding. We have applied for federal grants. We have not received any federal grants. So our revenue has not been impacted by this. Then, and quite honestly, the vast majority of the work that's been happening in Marin on federal lands has been funded through Marin Wildfire. And so a lot of the work that we had already planned, we're still going to be able to get that implemented. Where we might see some slowdown in our ability to work is the employment at the federal level, to make sure that we have people to connect with, to make sure that we've gone through environmental compliance and that we can get that work done. But we have plans in place to move forward on that line. And then just another shout out that we have the Climate and Wildfire Institute coming on March 26th, or excuse me, March 25th. March 26th, we are calling it our bridge event. It's going to be a keynote speaker. Daniel Swain from UCLA will be our keynote speaker with a reception. The reception will start at 4:30. Daniel will speak from 6 to 7 o'clock. Stand by for VIP invitations coming to all of you for that event. And then our Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force meeting will be March 27th with about 4 different panel discussions. One of them will be about the birth and how Marin Wildfire works. We'll have a data and science-driven decision-making forum. We'll have a forum with One TAM on how that collaboration works. And the final forum will be highlighting the Fire Foundry, and it'll be basically the Fire Foundry recruits sitting at the table explaining their experience through the Fire Foundry. And then the last day, Friday, the 28th, will be site visits throughout Sonoma and Marin counties at projects that some of them were funded by Marin Wildfire, some of them were funded through different resources. So it should be an awesome week. Just wanted to let you know that the bylaws ad hoc subcommittee that we created last meeting met yesterday. We spent about an hour fine tuning the bylaws. We're sent them back to the group. They're going to give us some feedback, and we'll bring them to the exec committee for a deep dive on in March and bring it to the board at the March meeting. And then just a friendly reminder of the letter that President Kurt sent to you all about being able to connect with your ops and ATC groups so that we can have nice, complete alignment for our work plan development process all the way through. And then we really need to acknowledge an upcoming retirement. I'm very happy for Chief Tyler, but also want to recognize the gap that will be created by losing Chief Tyler. I've had the opportunity, he didn't come, did he? I've had the opportunity to work with Chief Tyler for so many years and have had just held him at the highest levels of respect. Marin Wildfire has his fingerprints all over it. He was integral in writing the language that helped develop it. He was integral in the campaign that helped get us here. And in his representation on the ops committee has been absolutely vital for the organization. And a lot of the concepts that we are bringing forward as Marin Wildfire really first came out of Chief Tyler's mouth. I think it was Chief Tyler that said the house out approach the first time I ever heard it. I do know that preaching to his statement has been, we are great at preaching to the choir. We need to find a way to get the choir bigger. That's right on Chief Tyler's. And then just the importance of home hardening, defensible space, and how to be innovative about that. And then I think he's probably the first person I saw in Marin really focusing on homeowners insurance as a fire chief. And so a big loss for everybody. But as we told Chief Tyler at the ops committee meeting, we're not going to let him completely retire. And we will be reaching out to him for various items. And you will be seeing him at Ember Stomp because he's going to be supporting Ember Stomp. And with that, I'll stop my screen share and take any questions.
Questions?
Yeah. I just have a question about forestry. So the Department of Forestry has been severely cut back. Does that affect our relationship with them at all?
U.S. Forest Service? There's fortunately for us, there are no U.S. Forest Service lands in Marin,
Great.
just a National Park Service, which it'd be kind of hard to cut them when it came to fire suppression, it would be really hard to cut the Marin National Park Service more than it had already been cut.
Other questions? Barbara?
I just want to make a comment about Chief Tyler. I met Chief Tyler when he was just a battalion chief on the PDEP committee. And at that time, he was always interested in emergency preparedness. And so he's been doing this way back before he was a fire chief, and we'll miss him terribly.
Yep.
Thank you. Other questions for Mark? Nope. Any questions from the public?
There are no hands at this time.
Okay. Anything else? We have no motion required. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to consent calendar. The opportunity for public comment on consent calendar will occur prior to the board's discussion. Do you have any comments on consent calendar?
There are no hands at this time from the public virtually or in the room, but I did want to inform the board that today's minutes will have a correction to accurately reflect Director Donahue's attendance in the meeting minutes of January 16th. Those minutes list Director Donahue as absent, and she was present for the meeting.
Thank you. Any board members want to pull any items that are on consent? Okay. Thank you. All right. No changes to consent. If we could have a vote on approval.
I'll make a motion to move consent.
I'll second it.
Okay, first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Oops. Thank you. All right, we're moving on to finance report. Hey, Alyssa.
Good afternoon. Let's see, a couple things to point out on this report. One is that since this report was produced, we did get the second quarter interest payment from the county. So it's now at 161% of the budget for 2 quarters. So the interest will easily be 2 times more than what's budgeted, likely more. And again, the red when possible, I've listed why things are over. And the DSpace and local payments have all been recorded and distributed, with the exception of we have held back the payments for 2 agencies, but we did record them on the books here, but they haven't been paid out to those agencies because we don't have all the components of their reporting for last fiscal year. And just the last couple red things, the grant revenue, these were just, the budget was our best guesses, and what actually happens with the grant is what will happen. But I believe this is the 3rd year, the final year of the Novato fuel break grant. And that's all I have to report, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Do you have any questions from the board? Finance? All quiet over here. Any questions from the public?
There are no hands at this time.
Okay. Thank you. We'll bring it back, and there's no motion required. And we'll move on to Anne for the work plan update.
Great, thank you. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Perfect. Okay, so first I wanted to thank those of you who joined us for a field trip in January to the Ring Mountain Fuel Break. And this is a project that Southern Marin Wildfire has been moving forward with support from, of course, Measure C and Marin Wildfire, and partnerships with Marin County Parks, etc. We hosted a field trip along with Southern Marin Fire, Marin County Parks, and our Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership folks. And it was really successful. We had really good turnout. Around 50 people were there. We met up on a residential street and spoke first kind of generally about the context of all of our work with respect to the LA fires and the importance of this work for this community. And one of the neighbors had allowed all of us to go down into their yard and take a look at the home hardening and defensible space around their home, as well as the project. And so we were really grateful to have that participation from the resident. We are going to continue planning project tours and site visits, and we have some in progress now. And we'll probably reach out to Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break neighbors and really work with them to invite folks in Cascade Canyon out to see the work that we've been doing and meet the crew that has been working out there. They've been so happy to see this work happening in their neighborhood that they're bringing out lemonade and cookies and treats for the crews because they're so grateful to have this work done. So we'll be reaching out to some of you folks to help plan that, but really focus towards the residents in the neighborhoods and making sure that they can come out and talk about the project and ask questions and really recognize the work of those crews who are out there on steep slopes pulling broom and cutting broom. No, not yet. No date yet. We're also going to be working with our field staff. Every year we host a refresher course for our project managers and field staff who are out there thinking about birds and plants and animals and riparian areas and geology and erosion. And we like to connect all of these member agency staff and some of our land management agencies with our experts that we rely on for environmental compliance and to help advise project implementation. So this year's date is March 18th. We'll be heading out with some of our member agency staff, so you might hear about this, but it's a great way to connect in the field and ask questions and think through issues and concerns that come up every year during project implementation of veg management projects. Want to note that on this agenda, the RFP for the chipper program was approved. Thank you for that on consent. Preseason signups will begin as early as March. The season will start in April. It'll run around 30 weeks, 6 rounds of chipping, very similar to last year. Last year ran very smoothly as usual, and that's a more expanded program. And we see that the demand grows every year, so we'll see how this year goes. We also have an annual report that's attached to this agenda and will be available online for anyone interested. We continue to work with the grants program and direct assistance program. We ended up with about $700,000 to distribute through the grants program for home hardening and defensible space work. Our grants specialist has been working to finish distributing those dollars. There were a few residents who submitted pre-approvals but haven't finished all the paperwork, so we want to make sure to distribute all of those dollars to those folks who did work along their house exteriors and in their yards. And then we've been working on the direct assistance pilot program. Invited folks in Novato and Southern Marin to participate first, and then invitations are going out to San Rafael residents and Central Marin residents next, and then we'll see West Marin as well. We have well over 200 folks that have engaged so far in the process, and we're looking forward to finishing more projects there. An update, we've got a lot going on in West Marin. We're really happy to report that we've been, working with the county community development agency on coastal act compliance for roadside vegetation management. And our CEQA was completed last year, as was the coordination on coastal act compliance. So this work has been moving forward little by little. We do this work with great care. We have a biologist who walks ahead of the crew and flags off anything to avoid every time, no matter what the season. So we did some work in Inverness. Marin County Fire has been managing these crews, and they work really slowly and deliberately through these neighborhoods. These are the roads that were treated in November, December, and January. And then in Bolinas, they were able to work on 3 different roads, and then next week, they're heading to Stinson Beach, so additional work is happening there. So we've been working really hard with the ATC and Operations Committee on work plan development for next year. Our new chair is here today, that's Chief Weber, so he's going to report out for the Operations Committee. But I do want to note a few things. The ATC, as you may remember, is operating more as a working group, and this is really to dive into details and think through challenging issues in a more informal setting. So we've been working to transition that group to a more informal working group type format. And then the ATC has been working on, or will be working on, reviewing JPA-wide proposals. So we set a deadline kind of internally to think through JPA-wide projects and programs for next year, and we submitted those by mid-February, so last week. And the ATC will start taking a look at those, and we'll be diving into the details at the ATC and the Operations Committee level in the very near future. One of the issues that has come up that I'm sure Chief Weber will talk about more is the guidance that's going to be coming down from the state in terms of the local, the LRA fire hazard severity zone maps that are going to be released very soon. In fact, the Bay Area maps are going to be released on February 24th. And then Zone 0 regulations that will be coming down, at least in draft form, in March, and inviting public comment. So all of our jurisdictions are going to be looking for updated ordinances to react to these new requirements. So I think the ATC and Operations Committee are going to be talking about this quite a lot. And I think that's going to be a standing discussion item in all of our meetings going forward. There's a lot to discuss. And we'd like to make sure to coordinate with the fire prevention officers who also are meeting regularly on this topic. So we're going to make sure we have really good communication among the different groups. And then I want to note, we're going to be bringing some of these topics up on the screen to you, probably in March. One of the things we're working on is updated outreach materials to make sure when we have crews out there doing roadside vegetation management and shaded fuel breaks, everybody's got an A-frame sign with the logos, with information, with QR codes, etc. Most of our projects do already, but we're going to be taking an inventory of our projects, talk to our member agencies, and see if there are any needs out there for additional materials. We've got door hangers and flyers and trifolds for residents who've had a shaded fuel break installed that overlap their private property and what they might want to do to help maintain that project after we walk away. So we've got all those materials. We're going to be updating, printing, and making sure that they're available to all of the member agencies, because we'd like to make sure that our logo is getting out there and people know who's doing the work. And then, so we'll talk a little bit more about that maybe in our March board meeting. And then we'll also be talking about our models and tools and data for science-driven decision-making, all of that work that we've alluded to previously, but I think we'll dive in much more detail and share some of those information, some of the visuals from those models at our March meeting as well. So that's it for me, and happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Anne. It's a lot going on. Do we have any questions from Barbara?
Thanks, Anne. Just a question on this Zone 0 regulations. What's the time frame? Usually state regulations take 18 months. So when would we be expected to adopt something?
Yeah, I think Chief Weber's going to address that a little bit in his discussion for the Operations Committee, but I believe that some sort of draft is going to be presented in March at the state.
Okay, thank you.
Catherine?
These are the two ask all the questions these days.
All good.
About the direct assistance slide that you had, since I'm relatively new in this role, can you explain to me or maybe refer me where I can learn how it gets allocated for in priority setting? So it looks like Novato and San Rafael are first, and next to them, or secondarily, will be Central Marin and another agency. How is that allocated?
So the direct assistance program is really, it's a coordination between our grant specialists and each of the member agencies. And each of the member agencies provide their priorities, which parcels are displaying a need. And then they share that with our grant specialist, and then they work through to send letters and reach out to those residents. And so we've been going zone by zone and are just kind of working with staff as they're available. West Marin will be kind of last on the list, only because now we're running into kind of nesting bird season and we need to be mindful of the sensitive resources out there. So we're trying to time around the sensitive resources.
Okay,
that are
thanks. Zone by
potentially-
zone helped.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Other questions?
I'd like to make a comment. So Southern Marin has been making presentations to the city of Sausalito and upcoming city of Mill Valley and to the board, and heavily advertising the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority more than, but I want you to know it was very effective. The questions that come up are, who do we contact? How do we know? Do we call Southern Marin or do we call Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority? And so Fred really cleared it up. He said, well, you call us first, which is the agency first, but then we're all tied together, so we can recommend where do you go from there. But I just want you to know that that's another way of getting the word out there. It's very, Marin Wildfire Prevention is in all the presentations. Thanks.
Thank you. And I've seen Southern Marin's A-frame signs that are great at communicating project information.
All right. Any other comments, questions? All right, perfect. And we'll take it to the public. If there's any questions from the public.
There are no hands at this time.
All right, thank you. And we don't need a motion, so, all right, moving on to committee reports. We have Fire Safe Marin.
Fire Safe Marin is present if you have any questions for them. Otherwise, they'll just let their report stand for itself.
Great. Okay, there is a question.
Recently, I've received inquiries from my friends and friends' friends saying, we want to do something to help. How do we get involved? We are really good at, and they give me all kinds of talents, like being together with the specialized communities, doing forestry work, so can I recommend them to Fire Safe Marin? And then how do I connect them? What's the best connection for people who are ready to go with not sure where to go?
Good afternoon. I feel like we seeded this question because I have an answer for you. So we have the community ambassador program here, and we do a training. Actually, we do an application, and then we do a training process to train up a network of people to deliver wildfire safety information on the basic materials that we have, and then we deploy them into the community. So in Mill Valley is really good about the number of events that they have. And so what I would say is point them over to us, and we would try to incorporate them into our community ambassador program. It is a regularly occurring meeting that we do to make sure that we do continuing education for them, and then we give them opportunities to be out in the community, and we would partner them with someone who's very knowledgeable about it. But it's a really good way to get back to your own community and share wildfire safety information if people are interested.
I'd also like to add that we are working with the Marin Turns from the Fire Foundry, and they are putting together a list of volunteer opportunities such as broom pulls and other events. And the goal is that we are going to put a page on Fire Safe Marin's website that would say, get involved, volunteer. And we would just point them to broom pulls and other opportunities to just go and help out.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Please take a look at if you haven't had a chance to review the packet that's attached to the agenda. There's a lot of information in there, and also very helpful for community members. Okay, I think we're moving on to Chief Weber.
Madam Chair, board members, good afternoon. I'd be remiss if I didn't start with thanking Fire Safe Marin for all the good work they do with the outreach piece. You'll hear in a minute, I think, why that's so important, especially moving forward, that we've got to be inside every single household in Marin County in order to be effective. And we're going to have to resource Fire Safe Marin to make sure we can do that. So I'll start by thanking Chief Tyler, who's the outgoing chair of the operations committee. And I know we already rained accolades all over him while he wasn't here, but, Bill was instrumental in getting Marin Wildfire created, started, one of the architects. And so we do owe him an enormous debt of gratitude for his work and continued work. He's not going anywhere. He promises he'll be working on challenging things like insurance and other stuff, Fire Safe Marin work and volunteering, Ember Stomp and the rest of it. So, Bill, on behalf of all the fire chiefs and city managers and the ops group, we certainly appreciate your leadership. As I mentioned, I'll be serving as your chair of the ops group for the next 12 months, along with Todd Cusimano as the vice chair. Some of the things we covered the other day were updating the strategic guidance for the work plan. So we made some adjustments to that post Los Angeles fires to stay contemporary. But I think that's just good guidance moving forward as they develop the work plan. Heard a presentation from Jason with our Defensible Space Inspection program about targeted messaging to residents, and how do we get them to open those reports and then take action. And I think that really needs to be a focus of certainly ours and everyone moving forward. Is we've got to create defensible space and home hardening, and when we start to do it as a collective across our communities, we'll have the resiliency that'll be necessary to defend from wildfire. I think we have to change our focus, as you've heard Mark say many times. In California, we have to live with fire, and that means creating a resilient community, and it starts at the house and goes out from there. With that, the state is releasing, as Ann mentioned, the local fire hazard severity map. So just so everybody understands, there's kind of three land masses, if you will, in California when it comes to wildland fire protection, and that's LRA, which is local responsibility area, and that's cities, towns, irrigated agriculture, things that don't have a watershed value. Um, and then there's state responsibility area, which is really defined. It can be private property, public property. It can't be in the city limits, and it can't be federal property. But it's defined by its watershed value. And typically, it has to have a lower housing density on it, so you can still have houses across it. And what that means is the state is responsible for the cost of wildland fire suppression. And then there's additional regulations that may apply from the state to SRA. And then there's FRA, Federal Responsibility Area lands. And those are things like National Park, U.S. Forest Service lands, other pieces. So what we're talking about here is something that's existed in the SRA, which is very high fire hazard severity zones. And historically, those haven't been extended into the LRA, and that's what's going to be released. So there's 3 communities that are going to see very high fire hazard severity zones in the LRA. That's Larkspur, Mill Valley, and Novato. I think, it's not something to celebrate if you're not one of those, and it's not something to cringe if you are. What it really means is that these maps are recognizing the fire hazard that extends beyond the SRA and into the LRA. And as you drive, you wouldn't know the difference between the LRA, the FRA, and the SRA, right? And fire does not know these boundaries clearly, and that's one of the intentions of creating the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. What it does mean is there'll be ordinances that follow this, including Zone 0, which we've heard and talked a lot about, that are applicable to those areas in the LRA, and they'll be phased in typically. And it's Assembly Bill 3074, if you want to get a pre-glimpse of what was the driver behind this. It was the direction the legislator gave to the Department of Forestry, or Board of Forestry, in order to move forward, direction to CAL FIRE on the maps, and then ultimately Zone 0. What does that mean for us locally? We've seen with every fire occurrence the same pattern, right? A lot of wind, house-to-house ignition, driven by embers. There's really nothing new here. We're not learning a whole lot more with these events. They're just another tragic event to reinforce what we already know. And that means as fire chiefs collectively, in partnership with MWPA, we need to move forward with ordinances that do create, true defensible space, especially in that first 5 feet, and start to build hardened homes. We understand that this can be a challenge both physically and financially for some people. And I think, with your board's leadership, put a lot of investment in grant opportunities and other mechanisms like direct assistance to make sure we're still assisting people to get to that. I think that although we don't have timelines and a phased implementation, will be too slow. And I think we all recognize, it started in 2020 with the creation of Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority on the heels of some of the most devastating fires in California history in the North Bay. And we need to take action sooner. So collectively, the fire chiefs will be working with our prevention folks to develop and propose to the elected bodies ordinances that take into account Zone 0. And Mill Valley tried this 5 years ago, and it was challenging. So this isn't necessarily going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of education. It's why I highlight the importance of Fire Safe Marin and the great work they do, because it doesn't have to be terribly ugly. And I see Julie as a master gardener in the room. It can be done well, and it's going to be a challenge. And we've got to start with education and move towards enforcement. But we can't sit back and be surprised by event after event. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here. So what does that mean? We'll be developing as fire chiefs, fire professionals, fire prevention officers, working with staff here, ordinances to bring forward that we believe will start to move us in the right direction, protect the insurability of homes in Marin County, which is certainly first and foremost, and even maybe working with the insurance industry to try to make sure if we can see conversion at 70, 80% of our community, will the benefit of that show up with the ability to retain, maintain, or get insurance. So a lot happening there. But I do think we're going to need to move faster than the ordinances you see come from the state. And I think we need to expand beyond those very high fire severity zones and look at things like existing WUI or into the moderate. Or are we going to have this philosophy and policy across all of these housing developments everywhere? Because we know fire under 80-mile-an-hour winds doesn't really care whether it's LRA, SRA, FRA, in the flats or in the hills. So a lot coming there, and thank you for the opportunity, and I'm certainly available for any questions.
Julie?
Jason, as you know, the adoption of those ordinances is going to be challenging, political. It would be really helpful if when you all release those, draft ordinances, if you could explain the why and perhaps give some examples of homes that had zone zero that survived so that we can paint a picture for our residents that we're not doing this just for fun. There's a reason we're doing this. Most people, at least that I talk to about zone zero, they don't understand that you're doing it because the embers are hitting the house, dropping down and catching the organic material on fire. So if there's diagrams, maybe Fire Safe Marin can help with that. That would be really helpful to sell this issue to our residents that have wisteria all over their house. And the other question that I had was, thank you very much to you and Mark for speaking at MCCMC last month. That was really helpful. Stephen Torrance followed up on a question that I had asked in the chat, which was, can you give us jurisdiction by jurisdiction, the number of people that are signed up for Alert Marin? And I had heard, I don't know where I heard this, but I had heard that Ross had over 90% of our residents signed up for Alert Marin. So I was shocked to see, even though we were the highest number of residents signed up for Alert Marin, it was 53%. It was pathetic. So I'm hoping that as part of the ops committee or the messaging that's going forward, a big push can be to get more people to sign up for Alert Marin. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll touch on the tapping into Fire Safe Marin. Marin Wildfire's role when it comes to this ordinance adoption is to help bring everybody together in collaboration and to help the process of creating consistent language, but we don't have the authority. We're there to bring everyone together. One of the tools that we have is our relationship with Fire Safe Marin. So we've already met with Fire Safe Marin and we're already working on exactly what you're talking about, a package of presentation tools for the fire chiefs to support the fire chiefs when they go to their councils to get this approved. And it'll include very visual evidence of why we need zone zero.
So the question around Alert Marin, we're moving towards a new vendor. And with that, we think we'll have some more capacity for data collection and analyzing. Also, the ability to use wireless emergency alert and other functions that, the challenge now is we have less and less residential copper line telephones and moving towards the cellular side. And then the number of phones in a household can be 6 with a work phone, a personal phone, your kids, all the rest of it. So more to follow on that, but I think your point is it needs to be part of the discussions, part of the inspection, and we need to capitalize on these defensible space inspections and that we have an audience and that we're not just talking about home hardening or defensible space. It's a collective of the importance of why you do this, not just for you, but for your community, what you need to do to be prepared for an evacuation, the alert system. It really is encompassing everything. And then Chief Tyler has a little bit on the thing, and then we'll go to Director Kohler if that works.
I just wanted to tag on to what Jason was saying, but to clarify a little bit on these maps that are coming, because we were talking about maps, we were talking about ordinances, we were talking about zone zero. So the first thing that's coming is the maps. And these maps are updates from the maps that were generated in 2010. And in 2010, the maps for the local responsibility areas only identified the very high fire hazard severity zones, and it was red. So basically, if you were a city or town, if you were incorporated, and you didn't have any very high, it would just show as gray. It would show like there's nothing there. And then all around you was the state responsibility areas, and those were shown in either very high, high or moderate. So what's new this time around is they're going to do for LRA, they're going to show the very high, the high and the moderate. That's new. So if you if you were grayed out before, it's likely that it's going to show what will be maybe a surprise to some residents that are incorporated, that they now have a hazard that has been identified by the state of California. Additionally, any requirements with those maps come from the state of California. They're not things that we have made more restrictive here. But the idea around ordinances that bring in zone zero, maybe to areas that are required beyond what the state of California says, is for insurability and survivability of our communities. That's the main reason. So there is these maps that are coming. Once they hit, ours is on the 24th, we'll have about, I believe it's 30 days to start the public comment period, and then you have 120 days to actually adopt those maps. You have to adopt the maps. You cannot not adopt the maps. And the requirements for those maps will only be the ones that the state has laid on there. Okay? The other code adoption that's happening is the fire code adoption. So the state of California will first adopt the ICC codes, and in Marin County, we have identified our wildland urban interface areas, and there are other regulations that we have that are tied to the fire code. So because zone zero definition is not yet done, it is not yet been identified, it won't apply immediately to anywhere because it hasn't been adopted and hasn't been identified and rolled out yet. So through this fire code adoption, that will give us the real true first opportunity to decide if we want to apply certain requirements in areas beyond what the state has set. And that's a separate process that will get underway in July and will not have to be brought to your city and town councils until around December of 2025. So you have time for all of those things to occur, right? So not everything is tied to this map. So that's what I just wanted to help clarify for you all.
Barbara?
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, so on the zone zero, I have two questions. The zone zero ordinances that you hope to put together with the fire chiefs and others, when is the plan for the rollout for that?
So we're waiting on, as Bill mentioned, we're waiting on the state because we haven't seen what their ordinance looks like yet and the exact, but we do know if you read the language in 3074, we anticipate to be phased. It may just apply to very high, and I think I want to caution all of us that very high is not going to get us there. And there's actually very few homes when you look at the proposed maps that are in very high in the LRA. Or even to the SRA, and the effects we've seen in so many of these fires that we need to be broader than that. But we have to be careful we don't get ahead of ourselves and have to come back to all of you as elected officials and say, sorry, you missed the mark. So, we're putting a lot of pressure on the state to get the language and ordinance language out. We can see it, then we can make an informed decision. I do think though, with any disaster, we have a period of time where we need to act and have the public support. And so that's I think, need to move expeditiously. And we'll even have consideration of maybe coming to you before December if we get that information. But I think the reality of it is we have to wait for the state, got to see what it says. And then we can make recommendations on locally what ordinances we adopt that are, greater
Okay,
than what
so
the state.
the fire codes will come to us in November, December.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's strange to me that Department of Forestry is doing separate regulations. Why isn't this part of the fire code adoption rather than some separate thing which shows silos in the state, which I worked in the state for over 20 years, is typical. So I don't think they're gonna sync, right?
You know, we've been waiting for these maps for a while. I think the
So when we
fires in Los Angeles was a
to-
catalyst.
So when we adopt the fire codes, is that when we adopt the maps?
No, so the maps will be released on the 24th.
Right.
There's a 30-day public comment period. There's 120 days for the agency to adopt the maps. The maps don't do much other than recognize that the map's adopted, and then ordinances will follow. And we haven't seen the ordinances yet from the state, and that's what I'm
Okay.
saying. And I think we just need to be, as fast as we can. And I think that the political will in the state right now, I mean, these maps were taking forever to get out. And boy, right after the LA fires, executive order from the governor, and maps are coming. So
Well,
I think that can help.
So the other piece of this, since Chief Tyler's going to be working on insurance, as soon as those maps come out, that's going to be an opportunity for redlining by the insurance industry. Any houses that are in very high, probably high, may be good candidates for them to drop. So are we on this? Chief Tyler?
Yeah, these
who's
maps, I
retiring
wouldn't,
soon.
the insurance company's way ahead of the state on these maps.
Well, they may have them, but once they're available on the street, I mean, I worked on hazardous waste sites. Anytime you put anything on a map, it gets redlined. What do you think, Chief Tyler?
Yeah, so the state insurance commissioner came out and made a statement saying that there is no direct correlation between the fire hazard severity zone mapping and the identification of hazards, and then whether or not a private insurance company will decide to insure. They have lots of different reasons that make them want to insure or not insure. When the maps that were formed in California, taking a look at various factors like slope, topography, fuel, weather, wind, history, et cetera, does not take into consideration where people live or don't live. It's a landscape-based assessment.
Okay,
So it's not necessarily tied to a person's home.
okay.
And so the goal, though, is we know that in order for the community to be insured and survive, we have to do these hardening and vegetation management, including zone zero, to really make a difference. And so one example is in down in LA in the Palisades fire, almost that entire area was very high. So when that gets rebuilt, it will be rebuilt to the Chapter 7A standards, the higher ignition resistant standards. It will have zone zero, and it will have better landscaping management across the entire area. Altadena is not in the very high. So the question for the folks in LA and the local governments who get to decide how it gets rebuilt, state of California doesn't tell them how it has to be rebuilt. The locals do. And that's why those fire code adoptions are so important, to decide how are they going to rebuild. Are they going to rebuild the way they were so that when that next fire happens again, and it will, that they'll burn down again? Or are they going to try and put in all of the work to become a fire adaptive community and be able to survive those fires and conversely be insured? That's what it's all about.
Thank you very much.
Can you just bottle that up? That was very well said.
Yeah. Any other questions? I'm sure okay.
Just quickly, Jason, you said there were 3 jurisdictions, Larkspur being one. What were the other 2?
Mill Valley and Novato.
Got it.
And if you go to the state's fire hazard severity zone website, you'll see now 24th they come out, but they've kind of given us a prelude and put those 3 communities in there. And again, it's extending. What's that? Oh,
Okay.
So
Julie?
we can access the maps on the 24th where?
so if you just Google fire hazard severity zone maps, LRA, the state's website will pop up, and we can certainly disseminate the information. Mark and team will.
Yeah, Mark. And I imagine each jurisdiction will be providing some direction and guidance around when these maps come out. I'm looking at. All right. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Appreciate it. Any other, I think we're good. Okay, moving on. Presentation. Public comment? Was there public comment?
There are no hands at this time.
Thank you. All right. Okay, we'll move on to our discussion items. We have San Rafael and Novato PD Ranger Program presentation.
And we have San Rafael coming up on deck first. And I'm going to make sure that I have everything running properly. Somehow that's not the right one.
I guess that just means Nevada's.
Nice try, Quinn.
Figured I'd give it a
Nice
shot.
try.
Well, I can say hello while you pull that up, Mark, because I think I turn it over to Todd for the slides anyway. Afternoon. We're in the afternoon board. I'm Quinn Gardner, Deputy Director of Emergency Management with the City of San Rafael. And here to talk about a program that has been one of our priorities since the start of the MWPA. At the core, if we can eliminate ignitions, we eliminate our problem. We know we can't eliminate every ignition, but we're trying really hard to eliminate the bulk of them. And one of the most critical ways we do that is through our Ranger program. When most people think fire and fire prevention, they think fire departments and community organizations. But truly, our law enforcement partners are one of our keys. And not just in our ignition reduction, in our evacuation planning and so many other projects. So I'm really pleased today to really just kind of be here to introduce Todd. I believe you're doing the bulk of the presentation, all of it. Yes. To talk to you a little bit about what we've been able to accomplish through our Ranger program and why we think it's so important. So I'll turn it over to Todd.
Thank you, Quinn. Good afternoon. My name is Todd Behringer. I'm a lieutenant with the San Rafael Police Department. I currently oversee our patrol day shift operations. I also oversee our special operations unit that is comprised of Sergeant Rob Cleland, who's seated behind me, 2 of our footbeat officers, a mental health liaison, and the open space ranger. I'm going to be talking to you and presenting to you information about our Ranger program. Next slide. The SRPD Open Space Ranger program started in 2020, and primarily it was adopted after the passage of Measure C, and primarily works in the open space areas in incorporated San Rafael. They also assist our footbeat officers and mental health liaison with illegal encampments in the areas that border the open space. Currently, SRPD only has 1 part-time ranger that works a uniformed assignment on a 3-10 schedule, which is 3 days a week, 10 hours a day. For the past 2 years, due to a long-term injury and staffing shortages, which we've experienced, much like other agencies throughout the country, we've had to scale back our ranger program. Even though we've had to scale it back, we've backfilled the secondary ranger position with our special operations unit supervisor, being Rob Cleland, and our traffic sergeant. This has been an in-kind contribution to the program and supplemented Ranger Urton's efforts. The Ranger works with business owners, community members, elected officials, various work groups within SRPD, and many other outside agencies. Their primary focus is the elimination of ignition sources and illegal encampment remediation. The Rangers accomplish these goals through foot patrols, bike patrols, patrols in a 4-wheel drive truck, and an all-terrain vehicle. There is significant coordination with SRPD's Special Operations Unit, our SAFE team, the Fire Department, Department of Public Works, City Attorney's Office, Marin County Parks and Open Space, and many other government agencies. Last year, SRPD Ranger and the footbeat officers removed 241 illegal encampments in the City of San Rafael's jurisdiction. It's about 1.5 per day. The attached map depicts the location of where a majority of the encampments were located. The Ranger primarily sees encampments in open space close to the downtown corridor or services are easily accessible. In addition to illegal encampment enforcement, the Ranger also does encampment remediation. Last year, the Ranger and footbeat officers removed over 131,000 pounds of garbage and illegal camping materials. This remediation cuts down on the potential fuel sources that could start or cause a fire to burn uncontrollably. Of the 241 illegal encampments, 43 of them had some form of fire hazard associated with them. Fire hazards include propane tanks, fire pits, or ignition sources such as butane torches. The map depicted above shows the location of where the illegal encampments with fire hazards are located. Just so I can orient you to the map, where you see the cluster, that's basically our downtown corridor. Boyd Park is right there in the open space. You have Elks Lodge, and some of the other areas right in there. Up north at the top of the map is Terra Linden. Actually, if you don't mind going back one, I'll orient you to the same map. Same thing right there. That red dot in the middle that's the Santa Fe Police Department right across the street from City Hall. And you can see where 580 and 101 come together. And obviously the top end of the map is Terra Linda. If you don't mind pushing ahead. Next one. Next one, please. The pictures above depict a homeless encampment fire on August 16th, 2024. The cause of the encampment fire was undetermined. Unfortunately, 2 tents were destroyed and a nearby structure was threatened. As you can see from the photos above, propane tanks can cause a hazard to inhabitants, first responders, residents, or open space and structures. Fortunately, this incident was contained by the fire department. Thank you. And the fire did not spread to the open space or neighboring structure. I'm going to show you a video. Go to the next slide. This video illustrates the dangers of propane tanks located within encampments and is the reason why our rangers focus in on eliminating the flammables. The location of this fire is at an encampment on Anderson Drive in Santa Fe in our downtown corridor. And fortunately, it took place in February when it was cooler and more damp. The fire caused a propane tank to release its pressure relief valve. If you don't mind hitting play. So if you see on the right-hand side of that, that's the propane tank that I think it's called Blevy, if I'm not mistaken there.
Boiling
Chief.
liquid expanding vapor explosion.
That's right. And it did end up scorching that tree that's right there in the background. If you go to the next slide. Ranger Andrew Urton is a part-time employee with over 30 years of law enforcement experience. He has been in his role as a ranger for the past 4 years. In addition to encampment abatement, he is also responsible for looking after the 12 miles of fire roads in the city of Santa Fe. Ranger Urton regularly patrols the fire roads and trails looking for illegal activity. He regularly coordinates with SRFD regarding fire road maintenance and security for our fuel reduction efforts. And you see there the goats are grazing. We go in and clear and look for hazards to the goats, look for other encampments that the goats might be grazing on. And so Ranger Urton, along with Sergeant Cleland, does all of that. In 2025, the city of Santa Fe looks to bring back the second full-time ranger as our staffing improves. We will continue to have coordination with wildfire prevention officers and SRPD's footbeat officers to increase our presence in the open space, especially during red flag warnings. This year, we will also look to coordinate with the Novato PD and the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority to have uniformity in our data collection. I'd like to turn it back over to Quinn for questions, if there are any.
Just also add, because the work that's happening there is so important, is the propane tank video I think is so compelling, especially when you consider there were no winds in that video. And so we do pick up those propane tanks from open space where a little bit of wind would turn that into a devastating fire. And the other piece of those clusters that was on the map that Todd showed, we have had 3 or 4 fires on Santa Fe Lincoln Hill since 2018, which is where those clusters are. And that's with these efforts. And I can't imagine where we would be at without these efforts. And they are so critical. And our rangers are also working not just with the encampments, but we have no smoking ordinances in all of our open space year round. We eliminated language around fire season because we know fire season can be year round. So we also work to inform just hikers that might be out on the trails not thinking about their cigarette or other things they might just be carelessly doing because we've seen ignition sources there. So we're really grateful for this program. Sometimes it's hard to prove a negative because we're proving that we're preventing the thing from happening. But I'd also say that we have some pretty good data to support that and appreciate all the efforts of the Rangers and all of our law enforcement partners that support that program in particular. And happy to take any questions.
Catherine. Hi, Quinn. Great to see you. Long time no see.
Too long.
That's really terrific. I hadn't heard of this program, frankly, and I do a lot of this work. Is there law enforcement investigation into the origin then of the fire? And let's say it's accidental versus intentional versus arson. Are there then responses in which that individual is held accountable?
Yeah, so wildfires, and there are people behind me that can speak much more intelligently to this, but inherently wildfires tend to burn up a lot of their evidence, like a lot of fires, right? And that can be challenging. Generally, we will roughly investigate some of the fires we have. I think one of the things we want to look towards, actually, to be fair, kind of following Novato's lead, is what would it look like to train up our rangers more in investigation. it's hard because even when you can determine a cause, catching arson and whether it's intentional or not is challenging for sure. But that is something that we're looking more into, and certainly law enforcement on any crime that happens in the city has the lead on that, and we're appreciative of those efforts. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I would say we lean heavily on the Marin County Arson Investigation Team. And are you familiar with the team? And so in the event we have significant dollar amount of loss or loss of life, we'll certainly call in that team to conduct an arson investigation. We also have property crimes detectives. They're not trained. They used to be trained in arson investigation. We've seen turnover in that assignment. And so certainly we'd like to bolster it.
Great, thank you.
I'm just wondering if in that propane fire on Anderson, did anybody get hurt?
Coming up.
Not in that particular fire, but we've had several. We had a large encampment in downtown Santa Fe, and we had several tent fires. We did have one very significant injury where they sustained several burns and lost both their hands. So that was just last year. So yeah, but not in that particular one.
Any other
On
questions?
that, the consistency of having these positions and having the wonderful team we have do this is they are also building relationships, and it is an education component. And we talk a lot about a one-on-one, defensible space education, but there's also opportunities to educate and make sure that folks that aren't living in our traditional housing structure environment are also as safe as they can be. And in some of them, whether that's providing fire extinguishers, again, removing the excessive amount of material, that alone sometimes can make a big difference. So there's a lot of these kind of tertiary impacts that are not just beneficial purely on wildfire prevention, but the safety of the community as a whole.
If I could tag on to that comment right there and tie it back into the Eaton fire in Altadena and the alert and notification of those experiencing homelessness. This is an excellent way to get that message out on how they can find out how to be alerted and warned about wildfires and be more in tune. Because one of the concerns at the Eaton fire was that it did burn into a large homeless population, and they were very concerned about who was left behind based on not being able to receive alerts and notifications.
It's by design. Our special operations unit, our rangers are embedded with Rob's team and our 2 footbeat officers who have day-to-day interactions along with Lynn Murphy. We kind of take a holistic approach to this, and it's not just encampment remediation, that we're really looking to get folks housed. And I think that's kind of speaks to Marin's approach to homelessness, and it's not just eliminating, and Santa Fe's approach to this. So.
And next up, if you're ready, Quinn, or you got any more closing? I'm sorry.
No, real time. I think we literally have an email exchange going around right now about a identified encampment and right, like step by step, how it's going to get noticed, removed, cleaned up. And then after that too, we're going to come in and do vegetation removal in those areas. So we make them less desirable to be camped in again. So it really is that full cycle. And that is literally an email thread happening right now that will happen within the next couple of weeks as we move through that process. So it's a really effective program, and we're grateful for the MWPA's support of it.
Thank you, Quinn.
Thank you.
All right, now our Novato team.
Oh, good afternoon, and thank you for having us. It's really hard to follow that, Quinn. Novato's. I'm John Dick Schaefer, Nevada Fire District. Nevada Fire Mitigation Ranger program is very similar to Santa Fe's Fire Mitigation Ranger program. Our Fire Mitigation Ranger, Thomas Lyons, has been with Novato PD since 2013. Spent about 4.5 years at Novato as part of Novato's response team. So even prior to him becoming the Fire Mitigation Ranger that works collaboratively with Novato PD and Novato Fire, he actually did this type of work. He was a homeless liaison, and he held that position for a couple of years at Novato PD before coming over as an official Fire Mitigation Ranger. A couple highlights that I want to talk about. Thomas Lyons has experience working with the unhoused community in Nevada Fire. And because Nevada Fire is a fire district, we actually have jurisdiction across not just the city limits, but also the counties. So he works with SO on a regular basis. One of the beauties of our program is that Thomas's position allows him to be out there and work with our law enforcement officers and our everyday firefighters that are on duty, our battalion chiefs, and our fire investigators and arson investigators. And he's also part of the Marin County Fire Investigation Team, and he's gone through that training. The other nice part about it is Nevada PD is a resource for us, as he is, and then he can do evidence collection, fire investigation, arson investigation, and then help with report writing, working with the DA's office if we have to go there. But a lot of what he does is really education before enforcement. So he does fire mitigation hazard work, worked with Sarah Laberton, our vegetation management program manager, to go out there and identify these threats to the community and try to mitigate those through education and mitigation prior to actually enforcement. And then a lot of what he does is also community outreach and collaboration with the community and the nonprofits in our community. On the Nevada PD side, he reports to Lieutenant Bates, and I'm going to let Lieutenant Bates talk about his division and kind of how the inner workings of Nevada PD work.
Thanks, John. I think we're back on. Good there. Alan Bates, Nevada PD. I'm a lieutenant and I oversee our special services division. The best way to describe that division is basically any part of our department that isn't being driven by a black and white police car, by a uniformed police officer that responds to 911 calls. So special services is fire mitigation, our detectives, our school resource officers, our hiring and training and so forth. So Tom's embedded with special services for all the obvious reasons, and he has that freedom and that proactivity to be able to respond to any concerns that we have that fall within his purview. And John hit it on the head. His history working with the unhoused and with service providers made him a perfect match for this program. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to pass it on to Tom.
Hello, Thomas Lyons. They stole most of my slides, so we're going to skip through this a little bit. Yeah, so we'll just go straight to the stats. That one can hold there for a little bit. So John's a little shorter than I am. So like they said, I've been with the department for 13 years. I was a homeless liaison for about 4 of those years. Spent a lot of time in the open space. One of my passions was being in the open space. When I got on this position back in 2023 in July, so all my stats are fiscal year between July and July. My jurisdiction expanded from 24 square miles of Novato to unincorporated Novato, which was about 75 square miles. So as you guys can see on the board, some of my stats, the key ones, I've removed about 100 tons of debris from the open space, a lot of that involving encampments and abandoned encampments. I've removed about 10 fire devices or pits from the open space. I gained about 11 warming or cooking fire compliance. I'll explain that in a minute. I've personally extinguished 4 unmanned campfires. And then also extinguished 6 campfires that were actively burning with the people present. I had conducted 11 fire investigations and had 5 arson arrests. So up until recently, from the legal stance, we've had our hands tied about what we can do about encampments and removal of warming fires and cooking fires. So a lot of what I was doing was building rapport with subjects in the open space who had fire hazards and gaining their compliance. So a lot of folks were taking care of their own fire hazards for me, as opposed to me doing any legal action. And that's where my experience with the homeless liaisoning came in play, because I was able to build that rapport, hook them up with services, and get them on the right track, and also educate them on the concerns about their camp location and the fire hazards accompanied by them. Yep. So in the fiscal year 2023, 2024, we identified 57 encampments, provided resources to over 50 homeless or unhoused individuals, and then I orchestrated cleanups, which included the removal of hazard materials like propane tanks, fire pits, aerosol cans, and gas tanks. The pictures down there are a couple of the items I've removed. I can't really see the one on the far right. That's a makeshift fire pit one of the encampments had. And that same subject actually camp burned down last December. Go ahead and go to the next one. So like I talked about, the unmanned campfires, I extinguished myself, as well as the manned ones that were 6 of them. Removed the 10 fire pits, and then also I worked with the Novato chapter homeless union representative, and we distributed about approximately 21 fire extinguishers out to these homeless encampments, so they can help combat them themselves if something was to kick off. And in one incident in the marsh area that did occur, and they used the extinguishers that we provided to extinguish it before it got out of hand. So can't really see it on the map. I was hoping this would look a little prettier, but so 2 of our locations that are our biggest concern, and I'm actively working in consistently, is 500 Redwood is what we refer to. It's the bike path that parallels 101 at 37. In that open space, we've had we had 5 encampments. At the time of this PowerPoint was made, we had 2 remaining, and since then we had a couple move back in. So I'm actively working to get them to hopefully relocate. And then in the marsh area, which is where the skate park in Novato is, if you're familiar with that location, or Hamilton area, Hamilton Parkway, just east of Safeway. So there's approximately 27 encampments. I have removed about 17 encampments. Unfortunately, sometimes you remove an encampment and someone else moves in because we cleaned it out for them. So that's an ever-growing issue that we're working with. All right, we can go to the next page. So once I got into the position, I discovered some of the restrictions, or some of the concerns regarding our municipal codes and how they were written, and how it was preventing me from being able to take any enforcement action, or at least use it as a deterrent for subjects in the open space. So I worked with the Novato City to revamp some of the verbiage to be more in our benefit, and we're still in the process on some other making corrections to some other mini codes that will better suit us for fire hazards in the open space. Yeah, perfect. We can go to the next one. So I've completed over about 200 hours of training in fire investigation, as Deputy Chief Dicochet mentioned. So in October 2024 is when I fell under the detective role, or the investigations role. So because of that, any fire incident or case that occurs in the city of Novato gets routed to me to review. Through that, I've discovered, unfortunately, because a lot of people are not familiar with arson-related charges, that we've actually have a lot of arson-related fires that I follow up with. And like today, I'm hoping to make an arrest on a subject who had a fire a couple of weeks ago. So by me having the training and the experience and being able to review all fire cases coming through our city, we're able to identify if these are actually arson-related. I became a member of the Marin County Fire Investigation Team back in November of 2023, which really expanded my knowledge of fire investigations, because I got to go actively called out with them for major fires throughout the county, not just within Novato. And also they were learning a lot from the law enforcement perspective on what we're looking for in an investigation. So we're able to relay that information to the local PDs. I've worked a couple of fires with San Rafael and with Central Marin with their detectives, and helping them also understanding what we should be collecting, what we should be looking for in arson-related fires for their cases. Like I said, one of the things I've learned in getting in this position is not a lot of officers are very familiar or comfortable with fire investigations, and they are very complex and hard work, realistically, to really get down in the nitty-gritty of the evidence to try to find what we need. And like I mentioned before, I worked with multiple agencies: Central Marin, San Rafael, Marin County Sheriffs, the Marin Wildfire we had last year. I helped Marin SO with that investigation, as well identifying who that suspect was who started that fire. So we were able to work with Novato PD to track the subject down, because we're familiar with where he stays, and make their arrest on him. And then I actually helped with MCSO with writing the fire report, Because another thing we discovered is fire department typically will write a fire report. PDs and SOs, deputies, when they take their arson cases, they essentially are saying, we listened to what the firefighter said. They said this started the fire, the end. That report goes to the DA's office. The DA looks at that and there's not substantial evidence for beyond the reasonable doubt, they end up throwing the case out. So what I end up doing on these bigger fires that I get called out to or I attach to is I conduct my own fire investigation because I have the training for it and put it in a police report that will go directly to the DA's office because the DA has about 10 days to file on these cases. And unfortunately with fire reports, they don't always get completed within that 10-day period so they'll have at least access to my fire report that would assist with getting charges on the subject. And that was it. Some other things too that's in the pipeline that we've been working on. Sorry, I have to pull my phone because I'm going to butcher the acronym. NFD started rebooting the North Bay Youth Fire Setting Intervention Coalition program. So essentially for juvenile youth fire setters, for those who aren't familiar with it, they just kickstarted like 2 months ago. In one of my fire investigations in Marin County's territory for fireworks that involved a fire, I was able to track down the 9 kids involved in that, and we got all 9 of those kids in that program. They all attended and just completed that. And I'm working with the DA's office as well as juvenile probation on trying to get it set up so that that's an option for juveniles with fire setting as opposed to some kind of criminal charge. So if they complete that class as opposed to having a record for something that a lot of juveniles do. But so I'm working with that process as well as working with the DA's office with trying to figure out what their expectation is for arson investigations and how we can better educate the DA's office for filing purposes. And then in August and July, I'm hosting a platoon training for just our department regarding arson investigations and fire investigations, which I'm eventually going to be extending out the invitation to outside agencies if they have detectives they want to come to at least get somewhat of a little bit of knowledge of what we're looking at in fires. So, any questions?
And before we get to questions, if I could just chime in real quick and thank both San Rafael PD, Novato PD, Novato Fire, San Rafael Fire for this awesome presentation. I had the opportunity to meet with these folks probably 6-7 months ago, and I was very ignorant to what their program included. And when I found out exactly what they were doing, I'm going, well, we have to come to the board. You guys come to the board. And so that's reason number one that these gentlemen are here and Quinn are presenting to you today. Reason number two is that the Ranger program was highlighted as a concern with this community oversight committee. And partially because at the time we didn't have great data. But now San Rafael PD and Novato PD is providing great data. So the question was, should Marin Wildfire be fully funding these positions? Are they really functioning 100% towards wildfire prevention, especially during the winter time? And so I think both police departments have proven very much that this is a year-round effort. And we wanted to get this in front of you before you see the next work plan for 25-26. Before you guys see the work plan for 25-26 and see these types of projects proposed again, you can make a decision from a well-informed position.
Thank you. Catherine?
That was very impressive. Thank you. I have not even heard of this program, and I'm really impressed with that. Mark, I would be supportive of the opportunity to look more at funding this, as long as we address collaboration with the agencies that are part of the other zones that don't have the capacity for something like this, because they're smaller agencies. Just speaking as the chair of the Central Marin Police Authority, we're too small to have something similar, but I appreciated your slide that had the collaboration that you provided some services to Central Marin. So if we can look at something like this, being able to work with the other zones if needed, just an idea.
Absolutely. And I think we'd be more than happy to actually reach out to some of the other communities,
Yeah.
whether law enforcement or fire, and share the program highlights that we've shared with you. And there's many more that we just don't have time to talk about. I call it the hub and spoke model because Tom is really kind of the hub of this program. And then from there, he kind of branches out or spokes out to community members, nonprofits, law enforcement. On a daily basis when he's on duty, he will text me. I'll get a text from him in the morning when he comes on duty, and somebody from Nevada PD, and also our battalion chiefs that are on duty. So our engine company officers know that he's on duty, so they can reach out to him to come out to scenes sometimes, whether it's through for enforcement or education or a combination of both. Most of the time, I would say it's community outreach and education. So that model, I think, has been very successful for us. He also reaches out to our vegetation management specialist, Sarah Laberton, and our fire mitigation and our fire prevention division. Lynn Osgood is our fire marshal, so they work well together on a regular basis. And then on top of that, our fire inspector, deputy fire marshal, and then even he does a lot of training with our own folks, our own firefighters that are on a fire engine on what to look for, what not to look for, if you see a homeless encampment, what to do. And then the other thing that I think is really beautiful about this program is that the community members have his cell phone number. So, I don't think a week goes by when he doesn't get a call from a community member, whether it's, a block captain, somebody from one of the communities that says, hey, I need to talk to you about this homeless encampment that's in our community. And he can go out there and provide education and then try to mitigate it if possible.
Well, it's one of the opportunities we have in such a small county where we have so much collaboration to have somebody like you with this definite expertise and developing a skill set that you can communicate to others and teach others, but to be able to provide your services in other jurisdictions would be, I think, invaluable for a lot of us smaller agencies.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
No, not seeing anything. Anyone from the public? Nope, no questions from the public. Thank you. Oh, we do have one. All right, thank you.
Just a moment. We have one hand raised from the public. Okay, and that person is joining us in 3, 2. And you should be able to unmute yourself, sir. Miss-
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay, hi. My name is John McCauley. I am a member of the Community Oversight Committee, but I'm speaking as a private citizen at this moment, just myself as a person. I found that presentation quite interesting. I heard the words enforcement, encampment management, arson investigation, district attorneys, et cetera, et cetera. The public recommendation from the COC last year was the police rangers in all likelihood perform other police tasks beyond ignition reduction. The CO believes that JPA expenditures should be used for ignition reduction only. We suggested a formal report be given to the board describing all ranger activities and how the expenditures are allocated between JPA and other activities. So we've now received this report, but I've heard no conversation about whether 100% of the costs of these very excellent efforts should be allocated specifically and funded by the MWPA as compared to a recognition that there are other activities involved beyond ignition reduction. So that's the comment I would like to make. I don't see on the agenda any conversation about percentages, but as a citizen, I think it's a wonderful activity, but I don't think it should be fully funded by the MWPA. Every dollar spent here is a dollar that will not be spent in other areas. There's only $20 million in total, a lot of money, but that's, I think, a point for consideration when you consider your budget allocations next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Tina?
And there are no additional hands at this time.
All right, bring it back. Any comments from Catherine?
I think this is phenomenal. Thank you so much. It's really an amazing thing that you're on the ground, Thomas. And the value back to us is not what you're doing only, but you get feedback from that specific group of encamped people and what you can contribute to how we can handle this is just amazing to me. And I would like to talk to you offline more about that. And I totally support what you're doing, 100%. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes?
Wonderful program. I think all of us here in the community, the homeless situation is such a problem for us to realize that people can throw up a tent somewhere and live where they want to live, and at the cost of our community. And I'm delighted that we have a program that is looking after some of this and making a effort to clean up this disgusting situation. And also, I mean, I'm sorry for the individuals, but somehow going down Anderson Drive is one of the most irritating things that I can think of driving around Marin County. And I'm very happy for all of you, and thank you so much for your program to look after the situation.
Any other questions, comments? I'll just say thank you. It really is, sorry, I have to like do this. It really is so important, the work that you are doing on a day-to-day basis, because it's for our homeless community and for their safety as well as our safety, and to be proactive, to work with everyone, to provide the fire extinguishers, to provide the work that's needed with the encampments as well as other areas. I think we're looking at beyond the homeless community and the work that the Rangers are doing right now. And so and the engagement with all the different jurisdictions, I think, is important as well. So really appreciate this work. It's invaluable. And we need to address our homeless community and the issues of facing our homeless community in many different ways. This is one way to protect our community, both the homeless community and the general community. So really appreciate the work that's being done. Yeah. Okay. We are now moving on, staying in Novato.
Staying.
We're still in Novato. So now we have an update on the Novato Fire District North Marin Community Services presentation. And this is the actions taken based on the risk perception survey that was presented to us. I don't know, it feels like a while ago, but it wasn't that long ago. A couple months ago, we got the update and you guys actually took it to heart. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm back again. Thanks for having me again. Again, John Dick-Shane. This is Sarah Laberton. She's our Vegetation Management Program Manager and our resident biologist. So she manages all of our veg management programs and a lot of other work. So I've invited her to come up here with me, and hopefully she can add some information that I might miss. So I'm going to go back a little bit in history. And this was sometime last year, and it was a collaboration between MWPA, North Marin Community Services, Nevada Fire District, Fire Safe Marin, and Office of Emergency Management. Primarily, MWPA, North Marin Community Services, reached out to our primarily Hispanic Latinx community and did a wildfire risk perception survey. And I want to start by thanking Executive Officer Mark Brown, Charlotte Jourdain, who really took the lead on the survey, Lauren Galley from Nevada Fire, who did a lot of public outreach, Lynn Osgood, our fire marshal, who also assisted, Sarah Laberton, who assisted analyzing some of the data, Maria Jamarillo from North Marin Community Services, Maria Albujo from North Marin Community Services, and Mario Ochoa from Office of Emergency Management. And then we also had a lot of community members that they call promotores, who actually went out and actually knocked on doors and talked to some of these residents. So we did this wildfire risk perception survey, not knowing what the results were going to be. And it was really primarily surrounding the primarily Spanish-speaking community. Let's go to slide. Perfect. Thank you, Mark. So we collected about 319 responses through our outreach and promotores network that represent mostly North Marin Community Services clients. And North Marin Community Services, if you're not familiar with them, they're a nonprofit here in the county, primarily based out of Nevada Fire jurisdiction. And we work closely with them with some of these Spanish-speaking communities. 35 responses were collected through random selection. This represents the average of Nevada Nevada Fire District residents. And again, I mentioned that it was a collaboration between NFD, NMCS, OEM, FSM, and MWPA. Following the survey, we had about 3 or 4 meetings where we actually met and then tried to dissect all this information that we gathered and really figured out what it meant and how we can actually turn that into some actionable items in our community. So one of the things that we looked at is, what is the primary response that we're getting from these community members? A lot of the folks said they don't really understand what home hardening means or vegetation management. So we looked at that as one piece of it. The other large part of the survey really kind of focused on notifications for evacuations, get ready, go bags, that kind of stuff. Signing up for for Alert Marin, signing up for Nexel. And what we found, let's go to the next slide, please. What we found is that a lot of these residents were really afraid of the badge. When they saw somebody in uniform walk into their community, they would close their doors, close their blinds. They didn't want to talk to us. And it didn't matter if it was law or fire. When they saw somebody with a badge, they feared the badge. So if you go back in time, when you signed up for Alert Marin a couple years ago, you'd have to go to the sheriff's website. There was a deputy sheriff's badge on the left upper corner of the page. So a lot of the times these members of the community feared signing up for Alert Marin. So we had to ease that fear. So we reached out to this Latinx community and we identified one community in Nevada where we can go out and do a community event. And that was Armstrong Mobile Home Park. This is on the northeast side of the freeway in Nevada. It's right off of Atherton. Prior to us going out to this community, we actually had a vegetation fire just on the other side of Atherton. If you remember, there's a 3 or 4 acre fire that burned in the open space towards the homes, middle of the night. So it was a great opportunity for us to reach out to this community and say, can we come out and visit you? Moving on to the next slide. Let's see, I'm gonna try to catch up with you here. Okay. So the event objective, let's go one more slide, Mark. So on Saturday, October 19th of 24, we partnered with these agencies that we talked about and hosted a community outreach event at Armstrong Mobile Home Park. The event really aimed at connecting with our Spanish-speaking demographics, focusing on emergency preparedness, fire and life safety awareness, and access to emergency notification services and evacuation, which is one of the objectives of MWPA. So we wanted to increase their awareness, provide bilingual resources, facilitate enrollment in Alert Marin and other emergency notifications, i.e. Nixle, and then foster inclusive family-friendly environment to make preparedness accessible. So one of my reasons for being there is I wanted to, connect with the community, and I made it a point to advise at least our staff that nobody was in badge shirts. So we went there in T-shirts, no badge shirts at all. And then our fire district vehicles were actually parked out on the street, not in the mobile home park. We wanted to just reduce the threat or the fear. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, work closely with Fire Safe Marin, so I really want to thank everybody I mentioned, names that I mentioned before. Worked really closely with North Marin Community Services, and I invited them here, but unfortunately they could not attend. Office of Emergency Management, Madi Ochoa, was phenomenal in helping prepare bilingual documents. Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, of course, funded this and also was a big part. Charlotte Jourdain was a big part of actually getting the survey, interpreting the numbers and the results, and she's phenomenal at that. And then, of course, our staff at Nevada Fire District. Next slide, please. I kind of want to walk you through all the details to really kind of highlight how simple this was, but what a big impact it was to the community. So as far as the equipment of the day of, it was just a couple tables, a couple easy ups, a lot of material that we had pre-printed ahead of time, thanks to Fire Safe Marin, both in English and in Spanish. We had some toys for the kids. We had some coloring books and stuff like that. At the end of the event, we were there for about 3 hours. And at the end of the event, we had about 100 residents from this small community come over and talk to us and engage with us. And of those 100, we actually had 63 people that actually signed up for Alert Marin there at the event. So we had our laptops there, we had iPads there, and we were actually able to sign these folks up onto Alert Marin. And then, of course, there's just that ancillary positive community engagement, and that's children's activities. You'll see in one of the slides, there's a picture of Mario Cha actually squirting water and I think knocking over a cone. We handed out stickers and badges and really just connected with the community and did some public outreach. This gave us the opportunity to not just talk about signing up for Alert Marin, but talk about vegetation management, get ready, go bags, and stuff like that, which again is one of the big objectives for us here at MWPA. Next slide, please. The outcomes and observations, the families expressed great appreciation for the availability of both safety resources and child-friendly activities. So it was a really positive experience, not just for them, but also for us. We had a couple bilingual members there. So myself, Mario Choa, we had a couple promotores. We had the two Marias that work for North Marin Community Services there, and they're both bilingual. So it was just a welcoming face for some of these residents. So I thought it was a very positive impact. So the majority of the attendance that we actually had there were mostly families. So it was moms and dads showing up with their kids, wanted a couple stickers, and it gave us the opportunity to engage with them. Next slide, please. I would like this to be a model for other agencies in the county and hopefully in the state. Something that maybe is a document or, basically a program that lives in perpetuity in the fire service. Continue providing bilingual materials, interactive demonstrations, on-site sign-up assistance for emergency notifications. Consider hosting additional events, and we have actually looked at some of the demographics in Nevada's fire district, and we're looking at other events in the community that would target some of these Latinx communities. And then just more collaboration with local partners in the community, whether it's a religious group, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a business. There's plenty of opportunities out there. We just need more hours in the day. One more slide. I think that was the end. But one thing I want to add is in today's political climate with some of the immigration policies changing, it's going to be even more challenging for us to reach out to some of these communities. And it's going to be even more important for us to actually take the badge off, take the badge shirt off, no brass, no collar brass, and reach out to these communities and say, we're here to help you. How can we help you? I know law enforcement's doing a really good job of doing public outreach, but I think the fire service has to continue that cadence of doing public outreach in a lot of these communities. I'll turn it over to Sarah. Do you have anything to add?
Thank you. Yes, I would just like to add that the risk perception survey really allowed us to start fostering these collaborative efforts with North Marin Community Services, Fire Safe Marin, getting all of the bilingual, all of the documents, as we know there's a ton of outreach material available in a bilingual way so we can access all of the residents in Novato and the county. So I just wanted to highlight that. This was just the beginning, and we'll have more of these small events in those targeted areas moving forward.
And in the vein of what John had recommended as this being a model that we can follow, we've already started that process. We've had similar meetings with the Canal Alliance, with the Marin County Cooperation Team, the San Geronimo Valley Community Center, and the West Marin Services. And our next big step that would be similar to this is in cooperation with the Marin County Cooperation Team in Marin City, where one of the biggest things that was identified through the wildfire risk perception surveys, most of our outreach is geared around single-family residences, not multifamily occupancies. So we are working with that community to tailor wildfire preparedness information for multifamily occupancies. And one of the best places that we give public education is our defensible space evaluation program. When a multifamily occupancy is being inspected, we're not one-on-one with the residents, and we're missing a huge gap. So that's what we want to work out with Marin County Cooperation Team, and Fire Safe Marin's on board to help to create the materials for that.
Great, thank you. Do you have any questions? Comments? No? All right, any questions from the public?
There are no hands at this time.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Great program, thank you. All righty. let's see, we have the information items, the Marin Wildfire Chipper Day program, the annual report is part of the packet, I believe. Is that, yep. And do we have any items for future agenda? Future agenda items? Seeing none, then I'd say we are adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you.